At 7 a.m., the knock wasn't loud. It was patient, the kind of knock that already expected the door to open. Mara opened it in a t-shirt she'd slept in, coffee not yet made, and found her sister standing there with two duffel bags and their mother behind her, already talking before Mara had finished blinking. "I'll live here," her sister said, not as a question. Mara looked past her to their mother, who had the particular brightness of someone delivering news she believed was reasonable. "We're doubling your rent," her mother said, "to cover our expenses. You have more room than you need." Mara didn't answer right away. She'd learned in her 3 years of renting this apartment from her parents that silence bought her time to think, and thinking bought her time to avoid saying something she'd regret. The apartment had never really felt like hers. It belonged to her parents on paper, and in some unspoken way, it belonged to whoever in the family needed it more. She'd just been the one who needed it least dramatically, so she'd been the one who got to stay. "I can't afford double," Mara said finally. Her mother waved a hand, already stepping past her into the kitchen. "You'll manage. You always do." That phrase, "you always do," had been the quiet architecture of Mara's life for years. It wasn't a compliment, it was an assumption, and assumptions, she was starting to understand, cost more than anyone admitted. "If the rent doubles, I'll move out," Mara said. Her mother laughed, not cruelly, genuinely amused, the way you laugh at a threat that isn't real. "Move out where? With what?" Her sister, unpacking a bag onto the couch without asking, laughed too, softer, an echo. Mara didn't laugh. She also didn't argue. She went to the small filing drawer in the hallway closet, the one she rarely opened, and pulled out the folder she'd nearly forgotten she kept. The original lease, signed 2 years ago when her parents had decided, for tax reasons Mara never fully understood, to route the apartment through a property management company, instead of handling it informally like they had the first year. She hadn't thought about the lease in a long time. It had felt like a formality, a piece of paper that existed underneath the real agreement, which was family, which was understanding, which was, "You always do, but paper doesn't have feelings, paper has terms." She read it standing in the hallway while her sister continued unpacking behind her, while her mother ran water in the kitchen like she already lived there too. The lease named Mara as sole tenant. It specified rent increases required 60 days written notice through the management company, not a verbal announcement at 7 in the morning. It specified the apartment was not to be used as a secondary or shared residence without an addendum. Mara didn't feel triumphant reading it. She felt something quieter, a kind of tired clarity, like finally understanding a math problem she'd been avoiding for years and finding the answer wasn't dramatic, just correct. She didn't confront her mother with it that morning. She didn't call her sister out in front of anyone. She made her coffee, went to work, and that evening, she called the property management company and asked, plainly, what her rights were regarding unauthorized occupants and unilateral rent changes. The woman on the phone was unbothered, businesslike, the way people are when they deal in facts instead of history. She explained that any rent adjustment had to go through the company, in writing with notice. She explained that an unauthorized long-term occupant was a lease violation Mara could report or ignore, her choice. She asked if Mara wanted to file anything. Mara said yes, it wasn't revenge. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like paperwork, which was almost disappointing in how undramatic it was. She'd expected the moment to feel bigger, given how long she'd carried the weight of always being the one who absorbed things. 3 days later, a formal notice arrived at the apartment, addressed to the registered tenant, citing the lease terms, informing whoever needed informing that any rent modification required company approval and that occupancy by unlisted individuals was a violation subject to correction within 30 days. Her mother read it standing in the kitchen, and for the first time in the whole conversation, she wasn't smiling. "Did you do this?" she asked. "I read the lease," Mara said. "That's all I did." Her mother didn't yell. She looked instead briefly confused, like someone recalculating a person they thought they understood. "We're your parents," she said, as if that settled something. "You are," Mara said, "but this isn't a family agreement, it's a lease. You made it one when you signed it that way. There was no scene after that, no slammed doors, no tearful reconciliation." Her sister stayed 2 more nights, quiet, unemployed still, looking at Mara with something between resentment and confusion, like she couldn't decide which one Mara deserved. Then she left, not because Mara asked her to, but because the arrangement had stopped being simple, and simple was the only thing that had ever made it work. Her parents didn't apologize. They didn't acknowledge the rent increase again either. It simply stopped being mentioned, the way uncomfortable things in families often do, absorbed back into silence instead of resolved. Mara kept the apartment. She kept paying the original rent. Nothing had been fixed, not really. Her sister was still unemployed. Her parents still believed, somewhere underneath their quiet, that Mara had done something faintly ungrateful. But something else was true now, too, something she hadn't expected to feel. For the first time in 3 years, the walls around her felt like they belonged to an agreement instead of an obligation. She didn't feel victorious. She felt mostly tired, the specific tiredness of someone who had learned, late but not too late, being reliable and being invisible had quietly become the same thing, and that fixing it wouldn't come with applause, just paperwork. Just a lease, just the small, unglamorous relief of being finally accurately seen by the only authority that had never needed to love her to be fair.